You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back to another episode of Public Comment. I am Khary Frazier of Detroit is Different, and every Thursday, usually miss a couple here and there, but every Thursday here in Public Comment, we're uplifting a whole lot of what's going on with municipal politics of the city of Detroit. In today's episode, always based on a notebook from Malachi Barrett of Bridge Detroit, definitely gets into a lot of stuff of show me the money. Let's go to a classic phrase from a film. Malachi, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I had the urge to yell like Tom Cruise there, but I'm not going to do it. So, I'm doing good. Good morning.
All right. Also with us, Thomaesa Bailey of We Own Everything. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I mean, it's political season. I got on my early vote shirt. My shirt says this is my early vote shirt, just to let everybody know that we are currently in the early voting period. Election day is next Tuesday, so it's been busy all around the city. And so I'm just excited to talk about the topic today.
We have had 40,000 votes nearly cast as of yesterday.
Yes.
Between absentee ballots, there were about 38,700, and there were around 900 early in-person votes that were cast as well. So we are on our way. If there's going to be about, if we're comparing ourselves to 2021, there were like 70,000 people that voted in that election. We're more than halfway there right now, and we had a week to go.
Yes, and I'm one of those people that definitely did vote. I'm always voting on the boulevard. You can go to the Department of Elections and vote early. So I was early before early voting, and submitted that absentee ballot. They took it and all of that good stuff. But as I told you all, we're getting into a lot of this information about the funding for this mayoral race. So let's jump into it. Outside influence in Detroit's mayoral race. 2% of the campaign donations come from, 2% of the campaign revenues.
No, that should be more than that.
Detroit. It's way more. So my numbers are off. But
72%. 72% of the money has come from outside of the city, and 28% have come from so you just missed the 7 there. But yeah.
Okay. Yes. All right. I know I'm off here. I know I'm off. So yes, 72%. I do want to pull up like more of these maps so like people can see, because you had a great map of a lot of this. But I do also want to uplift 832,000 come from Detroiters, right? So this is the national map of where the funding is coming from, right? So you see across the nation, well, like major cities, kind of, you know what I'm saying? So you see some Miami, some New York, some LA. It looks like some Minnesota in there, and definitely Chicago. The different color maps show different people, but Mary Sheffield is raising more really across the board with small donations and large donations, almost double than anybody else. A lot of funding is coming in. And then also I have a legend in this map for what was in Michigan. So this is kind of like a Michigan map that you all can see. So the Michigan map, as you can see, like Mary Sheffield is blue, right? Blue is everywhere, even throughout like that Michigan map, as we see West Far stretching. And then even when you get local, still a lot of blue, but you see locally, a lot of people are not giving, which leads to 2 questions that I wanted to go back to here about what do outside donors expect in return for giving to a local election, which that's always the big question. This is something that you've raised before, Malachi, and in other elections and everything, because so much of this money, almost like 2/3 of the money, more than, is coming from outside of the city of Detroit. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is not unique to this election. I looked back, and at least in 2013, so if we're comparing the last time there was like an open seat, there's not like an incumbent running, that would have been 2013. About 80% of the money that was raised in the primary came from outside of the city, which is a higher number than the 72% that we see right now. So this has been, a long running dynamic, I guess you could say. I think it's driven by a couple of things. I mean, first of all, obviously, people in the suburbs just have more money to donate to political causes. The income in the city is a lot lower, uh, and there are concentrations of wealth in places like Bloomfield and Farmington and, even like Northville to a lesser extent and Rochester and Sterling Heights and Oakland Township and, even Canton and some places like downriver where you're seeing a lot of this money come from. Certainly the points, in Grosse Pointe and St. Clair Shores has been another kind of hot spot of some of this money. And then if you look in the state, it even goes out to Ann Arbor and Lansing and kind of Flint. So this tells me that a lot of people outside the city think they have at least a stake in who the next mayor is. When you look through the disclosures, you find that there's a lot of business executives and construction contractors and folks that do work in the city but live outside the city that are putting their money into this race. A lot of that money has gone toward Mary Sheffield, especially from the business community. Although Fred Durhal got the Detroit Regional Chamber endorsement, a lot of like individual business owners have donated to Sheffield. And then if you look, nationally too, I think it's interesting that you find places like Chicago and Miami and New Orleans and Atlanta and even Memphis are kind of sources of money. And we think about the kind of strength of like the Black political class in those cities. And there's, some kind of crossover there where we're seeing candidates go on fundraisers to some of these places, especially Atlanta. So yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to ask some questions about what that means and whether that's something that Detroiters should be concerned about. That at least when it comes to money, people who live outside the city have a larger impact. They are funding campaigns at a much higher rate than people who live in the city. Those people can't vote, so they are expressing their political voice through their pocketbooks, which is an American tradition now, and we have seen year after year more and more money going into elections. More elections have become nationalized in the way that they bring money from across the country. We've seen, larger sums of money coming from political groups, which is not really, some of that is not really captured in these reports. You can't really see what some of these dark money nonprofit groups are doing. They are paying for a lot of the billboards that you see up around town and the television ads even that you're seeing on the TV. So I don't know. I don't really have any like answers, but it makes me really curious about, what are the implications for this moving forward? Are candidates going to owe favors to donors? Does this shape or shift their priorities? What does it mean that so many people in the suburbs care so much about who the next mayor is, that they're donating all this money? Does it reflect an income issue with residents, or is it more about people not feeling connected to candidates and not feeling like they want to support them?
Yeah.
Or can they not support them? Or is it that the campaigns themselves are not working as hard to raise money from residents because they know that money is out in the suburbs, right?
And those are definitely some of those questions that I certainly got points on. Thomaesa, I know you got some points, but in that framing, I know it's hard to say this, but you're such a policy you nerd out with the policy stuff. Do you see money impacting policy, and in what ways has campaign funding impacted policy, and just more so from a macro historical lens, not necessarily like what you think is happening next in the city of Detroit?
Yeah, so campaign money definitely impacts politics. I did used to be a lobbyist, and one of the main things that lobbyists do is give to political entities, people who are running for office, things of that nature, because they know that they're going to probably be having business before whatever legislative body or executive branch official that they're supporting, and so they want to they want to make sure that that person at least knows who they are. And the best way to get somebody to know who you are is to give them some type of donation or some type of money. Um, and just thinking about campaign finance in general, to a lot of Malachi's questions about people outside of the city, supporting candidates who are running for Detroit, the mayor of Detroit. I would say that, thinking back to my time on the Stacey Abrams campaign, Stacey as a national figure got money from everywhere. She got money from individual donors. She got money from people in California, people in Florida, all across the nation. And a lot of it is because with individual donors, I say a lot of it is because there is support for that person, or they think that that person is the right person for the job and they want to help them, or they want to see them move forward. And so I think that's a lot of what Council President Sheffield is seeing. People see her as the front runner. People see her as the one with a lot of experience. And so they say, you know what, she probably deserves my money because she's probably going to be the one that wins, and she's probably going to put it to good use, and her campaign is really well run. Let me, I got 5 on it, something like that. I'll help her out for those types of situations. As far as influence is concerned, I personally would be looking more at corporate giving, and I would be looking specifically at individuals who have business before the city. So if we were talking about who's going to influence people, if you have business before the city and you're giving money to a political campaign, you're doing that for a reason. You're doing that because, you want to have a favorable political environment whenever it is that you go before that legislative body and ask for something. Not that, you're going into it with that intention. Some people are, some people aren't. But that's definitely a consideration to be made when a person is putting their money into finance. And so that's what I would sort of look at more so if I'm talking about who's actually influencing policy. And then I guess the third thing was about, will individual donors who don't live in the city of Detroit be expecting something from these campaigns, even though they don't live in the city? I don't necessarily know. I don't think that individual donors who live outside the city will be expecting anything. Like I said, I think it's more about support. But with these corporate actors, they might be, because they maybe want to, build a building, or, do something in the city, or have some type of construction or something like that. And so that they want that support. And more than that, they want people to know who they are. They want you to know that they gave, and that kind of thing. So those things could lead to influence, in my opinion.
I think I love you uplifted that. I'm always putting on like the business hat in these discussions. And from a business hat, if I don't live in the city, but I do business in the city, I do have interest in what's happening in that city. So I completely understand that. And also a lot of the people that are giving, as you say, like that already have business deals going and have been working with the city, it would be of interest for one of those people to give. To what degree does that impact what the when elected candidate would do in office? I think that kind of comes down to the integrity of who that elected candidate is personally, but it definitely does raise an eye. And you also saw one of the great piece that Malachi uplifted was a lot of people did double donations. So some of those people doing business with the city are like, okay, this is such a tight race. We don't know who's going to win. A lot of people, and I know you can expand on this, gave to Mary Sheffield, Santil Jenkins, and Fred Durrell III, as Fred Durrell III, on council now, Mary Sheffield, the council president now, but a lot of those dealings around development, and both of them speaking a lot to development. They received a lot of some of those double donations in business. From the lens of what you spoke about, me personally as a resident, it's a different lens. I think similar to not being asked for my signature when I go out, when people are running for election, oftentimes in these travels, I'm not asked for a donation from these people, and some of it may be people like, okay, Khary, you're like in the media space, but I don't even see it like at the events where they're even looking to solicit money from Detroiters. I told a story where I think this is long ago enough because right now it's like the end of our gubernatorial race, but I remember it was early on in Gretchen Whitmer's campaign, where it was a special invite house meeting, house party event that was taking place in Indian Village. And this was right after she did an event in Grosse Pointe where I came ready to sign a check. And this was like with prominent Black people. I was, I guess, on the list of prominent Black people. I don't know how I ended up on that list per se, but I'm there. And I was thinking, okay, I'm already walking into this political event. I need to write a check for $100. The money wasn't even there for Gretchen's campaign. The campaign money, they said all of our money people are in Grosse Pointe. So it made me feel as though even our governor, who now has been our governor for 2 terms, and people may definitely feel like I don't know what interest she's had in the city of Detroit versus some of the other places in Metro Detroit, but I do want to be solicited, even if I can give that $5 or that $10. I've given to campaigns over time, and always have in mind if I'm going to a campaign event, I plan on giving. That's just the way that I think, even if what I'm giving is a moderate donation of like $10 or $20. That's just my thought process. The first time I gave was Barack Obama, because he really made me feel in 2008 that if I gave even $5, and I think over time I gave him like $65, that it would add to the change. You know what I'm saying? Yes, we can. Like, but I don't know if a lot of the campaigning, even from a national, a statewide, and local level, they're soliciting Detroiters specifically to support and give money. And I think that definitely when you give, it gives another vested interest into a campaign. You're at a lot of these events, Malachi. Have you seen any of the hey, let's raise some funds energy at any of the things that you've seen, rallies, political events, for Detroiters?
Yeah, I mean, campaigns aren't gonna have, like, a square card or, like, a tip jar that, you can, like, put money into directly, but they are collecting information from folks who, to show up and get on their mailing lists, and then they can send them, emails that say, "Hey, we are about to reach a fundraising deadline. We could really use your $5." I always laugh because like, the emails we get from the national level are kind of funny. It's like Nancy Pelosi's like, "Please give me $5 or my dog will die." And then
Yo,
Donald Trump
yo,
is like, "Give us $5 to save the country," you
and,
know?
and let me say this. All right, they are hilarious, but they always are soliciting. Every
Right.
time I get something from National, they're like, "Yo, you need to give a $3."
Mhm.
You
They
know
are
what I'm
they
saying?
are they are relentless. They will not give up an opportunity, and we've seen that, to a lesser extent. I'm on some of the mailing lists for
State.
some of the campaigns. Others have either taken me off or I wasn't able to actually get on them in the first place. So I've seen some fundraising solicitation emails go out. Mary Sheffield notably had one after a mayoral debate that was televised. So like that's a high exposure opportunity. A lot of people tuned in, send an email saying, "Hey, if you like how I did, send me some money." So they've been doing things like that. It's hard for me to say like, what on the ground if you go to an event, like how many times are you going to be approached and asked to chip in? The campaigns are definitely say, "Hey, I could use your vote, I could use your support, I could use some of your money as well." Um, but obviously, you can tell by the numbers that some of the campaigns are better at fundraising than others. I mean, Mary
Hmm.
Sheffield, every out of every $5 that was given in this race, $2 went into Mary Sheffield
Hmm.
campaign's pocket. So, she's way out ahead. We haven't really talked about some of the numbers yet, but she's raised about $1.3 million total. She raised more than $700,000 in the recent period that goes back to the start of this year. For reference, Solomon Kinlock has raised about $410,000 total. Santil Jenkins raised about $406,000 total. Fred Durhall has raised about $250,000 total, and the rest are, way off below that. I thought it was interesting that James Craig only raised about $23,000, and he spent most of that. So, that's an indication of maybe how hard some of these campaigns are working to get donations. I think it also shows, again, to go back to Thomaesa's point, like who do some of these more deeper pocketed people think has a better chance of winning, and the money just kind of flows toward the candidate that some people assume is better off. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to get some money. I think it's tough at these events in Detroit though, because the assumption is that a lot of voters are already
Yeah.
disengaged. It's hard enough to get
A-
them to decide to
And
vote, let alone give money.
and I mean, I guess that may be my salesman business tactic of like go a step further. I don't know if it's the candidate themselves, but someone on the team should look at it like that. And let me be very transparent from all the history I know, and you can speak a little bit more to this, to Mesa too. Campaign accepting donations in a campaign is not as easy as just cash apping a person. And you have to be very clear, because if that goes left, I can have everything go left too. Can you talk a little bit about accepting how that goes when you're giving to a campaign too, Mason?
Yeah. And I would say to Malachi's point about who we're giving to, I think viability really is a big part of that. Like candid like people intuitively can tell, like, who is a viable candidate, who should I give my money to. Like, I don't want to give it to somebody who I know is not going to win. Like, if I see Council President Sheffield, her campaign is very well run, I'm going to feel like, okay, she's a viable candidate, let me give to her, because my money will have a little bit more um, will go to helping more. And then in terms of like what it's like to give, so it is not just like cash apping somebody. You can't just, leave $20 on the table and walk off. Like, if you give to a political campaign, there are disclosures that have to be done. You have to put in your first, last name, your address. You have to put in your occupation. If you're giving over a certain amount, you're going to be reported like that in these campaign finance reports that Malachi is talking about. If you give over a certain amount, I'm not sure what that amount is in Michigan, but if you give over a certain amount, your name, your first and last name, your occupation, all of that stuff is going to be seen by the campaign finance people. So it's not.
I think it's any amount, because I saw donations for like literally $1.
Yeah.
Okay, so
People's information.
Anybody. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's any amount here. I think in Georgia, it's like if you give over $100 or over $50 or something like that, like you're at it. So it's not anonymous in a lot of cases. You do have to report a lot of different things, and so maybe that can kind of throw people off a little bit, because you might not want people to know who you're giving to or how much you're giving to certain political campaigns. And then I did want to circle back to the point about Detroiters giving, and I wonder, Malachi, you kind of said this in passing, but I wonder if giving is also tied to political engagement. And we know that we usually have, low voter turnout here. So it stands to reason that we would have low voter engagement as it relates to giving to campaigns as well. Because if I'm not going, vote, then I'm definitely not going to give you my $10, right? And so that could be some of the issues that we're seeing with the heat maps about money coming from outside of the city. So giving to political campaigns just in general is a very interesting situation to be in, because there are so many disclosures and there's so many things that giving to a political candidate can say about you, and it lets people know who you're supporting and things of that nature. And so I think that's interesting, and I think people think about that when it comes to making a decision about giving.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, if I look at the parts of the city that have the bigger circles, which means the donations were larger, and the places that have more concentration of dots, which means that there are more individual donations. And I definitely encourage people, if you have our newsletter today, you can go on, you can scroll around, you can click on names, you can look at dollar amounts. It's really fun to just kind of see where some of this money is coming from. But geographically, if you look at the map, I think it lines up pretty cleanly with like the places where voter turnout is higher.
Mm-hmm.
The entire kind of central Woodward corridor going from, basically Palmer Park all the way to the river are sources of donations. Some of those northwest neighborhoods in D2 around the golf course in Palmer Park and University District and Sherwood Forest and all of that are big concentrations of donors. So is, the entire kind of Gold Coast, Jefferson corridor, whatever you want to call that area. A lot of money coming from like Lafayette Park area, where I know there's a lot of working professionals in the political space, as well as there's kind of this strip that runs through Indian Village, Jefferson, Chalmers. These are neighborhoods of more engaged. East English Village is another one. These are neighborhoods where people are more engaged. They tend to vote more, and also incomes tend to be higher. So, what is the correlation between all of those things and donations?
Yep.
I think that's kind of clear. So
yeah, and with that, it's almost like you see that it's also in that map that I just pulled up, just so much of the city that it's no dots. A lot of the footprints, and this is what's so unique about this, a lot of the places where it's no dots are some of those neighborhoods where they say more investment needs to take place. Like I'm just running this story concurrent, but these are the neighborhoods where people feel like nobody has engaged with us. And like how that lines up and what that narrative and how that story develops, it's like the chicken or the egg. And I'm one to definitely think, just especially, from a Black political spectrum and what we stand on for more of the empowerment of what we're looking at in our communities. That's why I'm big on saying, like, when I do go to a campaign event, I do want to give something to be seen, because I just know how much dollars have to do with the campaign itself. We're not even talking about the dark money, which I want you to touch on a little bit, Malachi, but a lot of times, it's very rare that a person that's raising less money wins the election, especially when it's like a candidate that almost has like double what everybody else has. So, and the dark money is not even seen in this. Talk a little bit about what that dark money is and what impacts that's having on this election, you think?
Yeah. So when we talk about dark money, that is in reference to 501c4 nonprofit groups. They are social welfare organizations. And basically, they are allowed to uh, collect literally unlimited donations from folks. They don't have to disclose their donors, so they can take unlimited money from people and not tell you who those people are or how much money that they've given. They also can basically take advantage of legal loopholes that say they can't coordinate directly with a candidate and they can't tell voters you should vote for this candidate. However, they can say this person's really great at their job. And hey, there's a mayoral election coming up. Did you know? And kind of let people like make the connection themselves. For example, 5+1 is a nonprofit group organized by Scott Holliday over at Detroit Action and Horace Sheffield, Mary Sheffield's father. And they have billboards up. There's one by Belle Isle. There's a couple on the Lodge or 75. I mean, you see them if you're driving around town. They say Mary Sheffield, champion for Detroit, primary election August 5. It doesn't say vote for Mary Sheffield in, for mayor, but it says this is a great candidate and there happens to be an election coming up. So, essentially they can help support candidates and they have paid for, like I said, billboards, advertising on the television. I have not yet done a full analysis of like how much money has been spent from dark money groups. And it is difficult to tell again because of the disclosure stuff that I talked about. But, Fred Durhal is being supported by a group called Put Progress First, which also is backing Mayor Duggan's gubernatorial campaign. And kind of similar to the Sheffield example, if you drive up 75, I was just up north last weekend, past maybe a dozen billboards, frankly, for Mike Duggan that just say, most effective mayor and like a big picture of him. I mean, why are they doing that? It's because he's running for governor and they want to put out a positive impression of him as an effective, public servant across the state.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's we don't necessarily know right now the impact of that. We do know that these groups have had a larger force in Michigan politics over the years. They've been used to great effect by Duggan in the past, not only for his mayoral campaigns, but to support or oppose different ballot initiatives. Folks probably remember like the charter revision and Proposal P and community benefits, and there's several examples of this where these dark money nonprofits.
You are bringing up things that Detroiters in a lot of those places where the dots aren't are like, that messed up the city. That messed up the city. As we get closer to a close, can you talk a little bit about dark money and how you've seen it even from like a national, and I know down in Georgia it was heavy, but Thomaesa, talk a little bit about that as we get to this close.
Yeah, it's so just talking about campaign finance in general is just a little, weird because you're talking about money, you're talking about who you're giving to and things of that nature. And then as it relates to dark money, I don't know a lot about it. As a campaign person, I've always been on like the policy side and the people side. I've never been on the finance side, but I know dark money is called dark because you don't know where it comes from. It's coming from the abyss, so to speak. You don't know where it's coming from. There is no disclosures. I mean, the reason why Malachi can make these maps is because when you give traditionally, you have to give your address. So you have people's addresses. You know where they live. You know where they're from. You know what has influenced them and what their situations are. Based on their occupation and where they live. With dark money, you don't know any of that. You just know that it's coming from a particular organization, but you don't know who that organization is getting their money from. You haven't seen them. There are no lists. And just like Malachi was saying, they can pretty much support whatever candidate they want to support, as long as they live within those confines of don't say directly to vote for somebody. They can put out positive messaging. They can have an impact on the media. They can do commercials. They can do billboards. And so I think that the whole thing about dark money, and to your point, Khary, about, the areas where there's no dots and nobody is giving, those people are looking at that like, well, that seems kind of shady, don't it? That seems kind of weird. Like people are just giving money from all of these nebulous sources and we don't know where it's coming from. I think that kind of leads to a little bit of paranoia about giving to mayoral campaigns and giving to, political campaigns in general, because there is so much dark money. In this country, we have, a Supreme Court case, Citizens United, that says a corporation or an entity, that's their speech. That's their freedom of speech. They speak through their giving, right? And so this is what we see a lot of in terms of this money coming from places where we don't know where it's coming from. They have the right to do that because the law is set up in a way where they can do that. And so I think that is probably one of the most controversial things about campaign finance, is the fact that you have these entities that can just use this money from anywhere, and then potentially, not directly, but potentially can have an influence or a say over the political outcome of elections, and we don't even know what's influencing them. We don't even know where they're coming from, and it's dark on purpose because they want to have an influence that nobody knows about. And so I think that's pretty much my take on dark money and campaign finance and politics.
All right. With that being said, the election is this Tuesday. If you haven't already voted, a lot of people have. Tuesday, definitely check that. We're going to be here in studio for a very special edition of Detroit Next. It's going to be a campaign night watch party from 8:30 to 10:30. It'll be fun. It'll include some segments from Malachi, Stephen Henderson, Bryce Huffman, Thomaesa Bailey, myself, and others. Talking about this election as it rolls out. And we can really talk a little bit about some of these council races, especially the race in 5 and the race in 7, which are open seats. So I'm looking forward to that. But this is another edition of Public Comment. Malachi, let the people know.
BridgeDetroit.com is where all of our content lives. It is free, no paywalls. You will find no paywalls on Bridge Detroit. Subscribe to our newsletters. This conversation is always based on reporting that I do every week in the City Council Notebook, which covers the Tuesday formal sessions, but also talks about different political and government issues affecting the city and solely the city. That comes out Wednesday. Also, check out all of our candidate interviews if you're one of the 30,000-ish people that still have an AV ballot sitting at your house. We have interviewed all the candidates at length, and those interviews are up on YouTube if you search Bridge Detroit Next. It's also available on your podcast platform channels. And yeah, we are in a full sprint to the end. Please get a hold of me if you have thoughts or feelings about some of the stuff that we talked about today in regard to donations, but also just where are you at on the mayoral candidates. Would love to hear from more folks. Would love to hear from folks who aren't planning to vote, young people, old people, the whole gamut. So thanks.
All right. And Thomaesa, let the people know.
Yeah, we own everything. Continuing to educate people on, who's running, especially in the city council races. I just recently uploaded an interview with Esther Hagabuk, who's running for District 5. Khary, as you mentioned, that's one of the open seats. District 7 is one of the open seats. So just trying to give you guys information around who is actually running. I want to give a big shout out to Khary Frazier, who, was the organizer of our candidate meet and greet, where we interviewed a lot of candidates over at the church up here on the corner. And it was just a great opportunity for people to come in and talk to candidates face to face. So that was really important. And we're really happy to be able to do that. So just continuing to do more of that. And just want to remind people that, the primary is August 5th. This is where we are going to be voting to narrow these candidates down. There are, I want to say, 9 mayoral candidates. And so when you go to vote on Tuesday, whoever is the top 2, those people will have to be voted on again in November. So just please get out and vote. Primary voter turnout is pretty low in a lot of cases. So just know that this is where we choose the 2 people that we're going to vote on in November, right? And so we want to make sure that those 2 people are the right 2 people. So I would just, caution everybody to please get out and vote.
Definitely. With that being said, all right, we're going to take a little time off as City Council's going to be in recess. We're going to do more with Detroit Next, but you better believe after Labor Day, y'all be watching the Detroit Lions.
I'm going to be watching the Detroit Lions Thursday.
And so much more. Yes, Thomaesa will be watching preseason football, which is an experience.
Are you going? Are you going to be at Ford Field, or are you just watching on the TV?
I'm going to watch on Peacock.
Okay, nice.
But for most of you all, as that's happening, this election will be heating up. And this is definitely a place and space where, if you all kind of know those September sessions of council, especially leading to election, it's going to be some heavy discussions. Even in the notebook, more of the votes on the curfew that we spoke of, that was a 7-1 pass through. And then shout out to Tony McElwain and you upraised what she's been dealing with over there, that horrible hotel.
That was crazy.
Ravendale.
I remember seeing the story back in like February or March when people were like demonstrating outside the hotel. But wow, some of the stories that people had about what's, allegedly, I should say, going on over there is nuts. Also, I should have mentioned this was the last meeting for July. They're going on recess for August. So I don't know. We'll find some stuff to talk about, I'm sure. But
Oh yeah.
council will not be meeting in the month of August.
Yeah, we're gonna come back definitely before they meet, and we're gonna have a good episode, maybe even two, about some of these city council races and mayoral races before we roll in. But Tony McElwain, one of the grandmas of the street team, connected to Detroit is different. We love Tony. She's been pushing for that of what's been dealing over there, as you say, allegedly, but we connected to Tony, represent for the people. With that being said, peace. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.